Quan, I don't know if there's any opening remarks you would like to begin with to set the tone in our minds before we go into book 2.
Okay. My remarks won't be very long because we are already at our 4th session of the Mencius. Simply that the book 2 is quite important because he will tackle the central idea of the innate human goodness. Because in book 1, we tackle some fundamental principles of metaphysics and the basis for the creation of virtuous man and a virtuous society, which is the task of the philosopher king. And in book 2, it's the other major metaphysical principle, meaning the belief by the Confucianists or the scholars in the innate goodness of human nature.
So book 2 will require, there's some words of introduction, and then we'll have some readers. So who wants to read the first page of introduction to the book?
The second book of Mencius begins with long and detailed conversations between Mencius and a man named Gongsun Chow, or Chu. Gongsun Chu is clearly identified as a native of the state of Qi. And when the book is viewed overall, it appears likely that the greater portion of it may have been assembled by Gongsun Chu himself, recording his knowledge of Mencius's speech and conduct while in Qi. Many of the characters we encounter as actors in book 2 were presumably men of Qi, or Mencius's followers there, and their identities are unknown outside the confines of the Mencius. Qi was located in the northern region of Shandong Peninsula, and Mencius's home state, Shu, was not far to the south. Judging by the contents of the book, Mencius seems likely to have twice journeyed to Qi to seek a career at court. All of book 2a appears in picture Mencius during his first stay there, prior to the reign of King Xuan, who figures so much in book 1. But at book 2b, 2 through 3, we see Mencius commit an offense of courtesy against the unspecified king of Qi. And it seems likely that this concluded his first visit. When the narrative is next explicit about Qi at 2b6, Mencius has just received high appointment as an advisor of King Xuan about 315, and the remainder of the book focuses on the war with Yan and its aftermath, leading at the close of the book to Mencius's retirement from Qi. Book 2 is famous, however, not for discussions of Mencius's political career, but for 2 major passages concerning human nature and self-cultivation. 2a2, the longest passage in the entire text, and 2a6, where Mencius gives his most persuasive argument that humans are by nature good. As the book begins, Gongsun Chu asks Mencius whether he sees himself as able to restore to Qi the glory of its 2 most famous prime ministers of the past, the 7th century figure Guanzhong and Yanxi, who lived a century later. Mencius clarifies for him and for us that his aspirations go far beyond the type of state strength achieved by those men. He begins by speaking of how earlier Confucians, such as the son of Confucius, disciple Shengshi, and regarded such accomplishments. Book 2b has two major themes. The first is one we will encounter often. Mencius's responses to challenges that his behavior is inconsistent with ethical principle. We see this theme highlighted in passages such as 2b 2 through 3 and 2b 5 through 7. The latter part of 2b from 2b 8 on concerns Mencius's response to Qi's invasion of Yan, which led to his final departure from Qi.
Okay. Thank you, Bob.
Sure.
So Quan, do you want individuals to have multiple voices doing the dialogue, or should we do it like last time where we had one person read several pages at a time, playing all parts on that page?
I think the second solution is better for the good understanding of the text. Maybe there could be a second person would read the notes at the end of the section.
Okay. Okay, that's good. All right, so this is now taking place in Xi, right? Okay. Who would like to read the first 2A section?
Okay, I'll read.
All right, Eureka.
Gong Sun, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect.
Gong Sun Chu asked, if you, sir, were able to command the course of Qi, did I say Qi?
Qi.
Qi, would not achievements on par with Guan Zong and Yang Zi be possible? Mencius said, really, you are such a native of Qi. All you know about are Guangzong and Yangzi. Someone once asked Zhang Ji, Master, who is the worthier, you or Zilu? Zhang Ji answered with furrowed brow, my father held Zilu in awe. His questioner said, well then, what about you and Guanzong? At this, Zhang Ji flushed with displeasure. How could you compare Guanzong and me? Guanzong gained such utter control of his lord and monopolized the reins of government for so long, yet his accomplishments were so base. Why would you ever compare me to such a man? Even Zhang Ji felt that Guangzong was beneath him, and now you wish to compare me to him? But Guanzong led his sword to rule as hegemon over the states, and Yangzi made his lord illustrious. Are these men unworthy of emulation? Mencius said, to make the lord of Qi rule as a true king would be as easy as turning over one's hand. If this is so, then I'm more confused than ever. After all, King Wen, for all his virtue, lived to be 100 and had not yet brought the world under his rule. King Wu and the Duke of Zhou succeeded him. Only then did their rule prevail. Now you speak of ruling as a true king as though it were a simple thing. Does that mean that King Wen is unworthy of emulation too? Mencius said, how could we compare this situation to King Wen's? From the time of Tang to the time of Wu Ding, there were 6 or 7 kings who were sage worthies. The world had cleaved to the yin for a long time, and what has long persisted is difficult to change. Wu Ding commanded the many lords at his court and presided over the world as if he were turning it in his palm. Zhu was not far removed in time from Wu Ding. The traditions inherited from his predecessors, their influence and good policies were all still present. Moreover, his closest advisors, Wei Zi, Wei Zong, Prince Bigan, Yi Zi, Yao Ji, all were worthy men who assisted Zhu and provided their support. It was for these reasons that it was only after many years that Zhu lost his grip. Not a foot of territory was not his land, not a single man was not his subject, while King Wen was just rising to prominence from a territory only 100 li square. This is why it was so difficult for him. The people of Qi have a saying, "Though you may be clever and wise, the fortunes of circumstance are better to ride. Though you may farm with the blade of a hoe, the time of the season is what you must know." It is the nature of the present time that makes true kinship easy to attain. Even at the height of their powers, the Xia, Yin, Zhu kings never held a territory of more than 1,000 li under their direct control, and Qi is certainly as big as this. The crowd of farmyard cocks and the barking of family dogs can be heard everywhere within the state from border to border. Qi certainly has the necessary population. Without expanding its borders or adding new manpower, if state governance were to accord with policies of humanity, no one could stop Qi's lord from ruling all as a true king. Moreover, never has the world waited longer for a true king to arise, and never have the people suffered under tyranny more cruel than they do now. It is easy to provide food for the hungry and drink for the thirsty, Confucius said. The influence of virtue spreads faster than an order sent through the stations of the post. In a time like the present, if a state of 10,000 chariots were to practice humane governance, the people would rejoice as though they had been released from the torture of being hung by their heels. With half the effort of the ancients, twice the achievements can be accomplished now. It is the times which make it so.
Very beautiful. Who would like to read the footnotes or the notes on the side?
I can go ahead. The person who was over here just left, so there's no one. The 2A1, right?
Yeah.
Guan Zong and Yan Xi were famous chief ministers of former rulers in Qi. See the index of persons for more detail.
Yeah, whenever it says see the index or something, you don't have to read that, just whatever the content is.
Confucian disciple Zhang Xi. I don't know, how do you spell the first and how do you spell the second? Zhang. Hello?
How do you pronounce?
Zongxi.
Yeah,
Zongxi.
How do you
Zongxi.
pronounce? Zongxi, sorry. Zongxi was the son of the Confucian disciple Zhengxi. Zilu was a disciple much senior to Zhengxi. Wunding was a Chang king, ruling over 3 centuries after Tang. Su was the wicked last ruler of the Shang. Wei Ti and the others were all wise ministers to the tyrant Su.
Just quick, Quan, to refresh the memory, the period that we're talking when Chow,
Chow.
yeah, was the ruler. That was during which dynasty? Was that the Chow Dynasty, or is that before that?
Okay. Chow with an accent on the O was the nickname of the last Shang king, and his official name was Dixin, Dixin, and as written on the paper, he ruled at the end of the Shang Dynasty. But it was not to be confused with the Chow Dynasty, also written Zhou, but that Chow with the accent was the last king of the former dynasty called Shangying.
Got you. Thank you. That name threw me off. Okay.
Okay.
And then Chow, just to remind us, the Chow Dynasty ended around 400 BC or so before it breaks into the warring states.
Well, the Chow Dynasty began to rule in 1046 BCE and it ended in 256 BCE.
Okay.
But they truly ruled the first three between 1046 BCE to 770 BCE, and after that between 1770 BCE to the foundation of the empire in 221 BCE, we have a state of disunion, but the Chow king still retain enough prestige to be the cultural leaders of the Chinese Confederation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And maybe just a little comment. Here you see Confucius, you see Mencius answering that he's not impressed by the fact that he has been compared to two technocrats, okay? Guang Zhong, working around 650 BCE, who advised the Duke Huan of Qi during that 7th century BCE, and he was very efficient in restoring order inside the state. And Yan Zi in the 6th century BCE, and Confucius met that Yan Zi when he was young in his 30s, also a kind of technocrat capable to restore order and economical development in the state, but not favoring the education of the true king. That's why Mencius was a little bit taken aback to be compared to two technocrats.
Mm. Okay. All right. Who would like to read section 2A, point 2? Oh, yeah, Eureka. Yeah, keep going for it.
Gongsun Chu asked, if you, sir, were to receive a high post among the grandees of Qi and were able to implement the Tao, it would not be startling if the ruler were to rise to the position of hegemon or even a true king. If this were to occur, would your heart be moved by this? No, replied Mencius. By the age of 40, I had cultivated a heart that could not be moved. If that is so, then you, sir, have exceeded the valor of Meng Ben by far. That is not difficult, said Mencius. Actually, Guo Zi attained an unmoving heart earlier than I. Is there a Tao for achieving an unmoving heart? Asked Gongsun Chu. Yes, replied Mencius, there is. The formula by which Bogong Yu nurtured his valor was this: I shall not allow my skin to recoil in the least, or let my stare flinch. I shall consider the slightest touch of another to be as insulting as if he were whipping me publicly in a market or court. What I would not accept from a coarsely clad commoner, I will not accept from the ruler of a state of 10,000 chariots. I shall look upon stabbing a great ruler as though I were stabbing a coarsely clad commoner. I shall have no fear of patrician lords. Any insulting sound that reaches my ear, I must return. The formula by which the warrior Mencius she nurtured his valor was this: I shall regard defeat as the same as victory. To advance only after having measured the enemy or meet the enemy only after having plotted for victory shows fear of the enemy armies. How could I guarantee victory? All I can be assured of is that I will be fearless. Mencius she resembles Zheng Zi. Bogong Yu resembles Zi Xia. I do not know which type of valor is the finer, but Mencius she was a man who preserved self-control. Once Zheng Ji addressed Zi Xiang thus: do you delight in valor? I once heard from the master about great valor. If I search inwardly and find that I am not fully upright, though I face a mere coarsely clad commoner, I shall not threaten him. If I search inwardly and find that I am fully upright, though I face 10 million men, I will attack. The manner in which Mencius she preserved his qi is not as fine as the way Zheng Zi preserved his self-control. Gongzhen Chu said, may I inquire about the formulas that you and Guazi used to attain an unmoving heart? Mencius replied, Guazi's rule was, if you cannot find sanction for a course of action in the teachings, do not search for it in your heart. If you cannot find sanction for a course of action in your heart, do not search for it in your qi. I agree to the formula. If you do not find in the heart, do not search for it in the qi. But it is unacceptable to say, if you do not find it in the teachings, do not search for it in your heart. This will is the leader of the qi, and qi is something that fills the body. Wherever the will leads, the qi follows. Thus there is a saying, grasp your will and do not dissipate your qi. Wangzhen Chow said, on the one hand, you have said, wherever the will leads, the qi will follow. But you have also said, grasp your will and do not dissipate your qi. Is there not an inconsistency? Mencius answered, when the will is unified, it moves the qi. But when the qi is unified, it can move the will. For example, when you see a man stumble or rush about, this is the action of his qi. In such cases, it has turned back upon the heart and moved it. Gongzhen Chu said, may I presume to inquire how you, sir, excel? I can interpret what speech means, replied Mencius, and I nurture well my flood-like qi. Gongzhen Chu asked, what do you mean by flood-like qi? It is hard to describe, said Mencius. This is a qi that is as vast and firm as can be. If one nurtures it by means of straightforward action and never impairs it, then it will fill all between heaven and earth. It is a chi that is a companion to righteousness and the Tao. Without these, it will starve away. It is generated through the long accumulation of acts of right. It is not something that can be seized through a single righteous act. If in your actions there is any sense of inadequacy in your heart, it will starve away. This is why I say that Gao Zi never really understood righteousness. He looked for it in internal standards other than the heart.
I think it was external standards.
External standards makes more sense. He looked for it in external standards other than the heart. But your task must always be before you, and you must not go making small adjustments. The task of nurturing this chi must never be forgotten by the heart, but you must not meddle and try to help it grow. Don't be like the simpleton from the state of Song. There was a man of Song who was concerned that the sprouts in his field were not growing well, so he went and tugged at each one. He went home utterly exhausted and said, "Oh, I've made myself ill today. I've been out helping the sprouts to grow." His sons rushed out to look and found the stalks all shriveled up. There are few in the world who do not help their sprouts grow. There are those who do not weed. They have simply given the whole task up as useless. But the ones who tug on the sprouts to help them grow, they are worse than useless, for they do harm.
Wow, this is so Schillerian. No man must is the principle of the aesthetical development of the soul. Sorry, that's a further conversation. I just couldn't help myself. Keep going. I'm sorry.
No, maybe it's. I think there's a resonance. Do you mind expanding on what you just said, Matt?
I don't want to disrupt the flow of the lesson. I should have kept my mouth shut, I think. I was just more referring to this idea of of likening the soul or the chi to a garden, which yearns to transform in a natural way. But what is the best way to do that? And like he's just getting at this wonderful example of somebody who does it unnaturally is they go out and they're physically trying to pull on the on the stalks to make them grow, which does damage, which is worse than people who just give up. Maybe they tried to grow their garden, but they did it badly. They didn't learn the nature of the gardening skill, so they just gave up and stopped trying. That's less bad. They're both bad, but that's less bad than the person who thinks that what they're doing is good, but they don't know what they're doing and they're still acting and they're making it worse. And I was just thinking about how Schiller develops that idea in the Aesthetical Letters on the aesthetical education of human beings, regarding how you have to cultivate the passion for learning and truth more than forcing a student to behave a certain way according to formulas.
Yeah.
Gongzhen Chu asked, "What do you mean when you say you can interpret what speech means?" When I hear biased speech, I can tell what has obscured the man's understanding. When I hear excessive speech, I can tell what trap the man has fallen into. When I hear deviant speech, I can tell where the man has strayed. When I hear evasive speech, I can tell at what point the man has exhausted his reasons. When these defects are born in the mind, they bring harm to self-governance. And when proclaimed as policies of state, they bring harm to its affairs. If a sage were to arise again, he would surely affirm what I say. Zai Wu and Zigong excelled in the persuasive arts of speech, while Ran Nu, Minzi, and Yan Yuan excelled in expressing virtue in words. While Confucius excelled in both, he said, I have no ability when it comes to the arts of speech. Thus, have you, sir, already reached the level of a sage? Mencius said, what sort of thing is that to say? Once Zigong asked Confucius, are you a sage? And Confucius replied, sage? My abilities are not at that level. I am just one who never tires of study or wearies of teaching, Zigong said. To study without tiring is wisdom. To reach without wearying is humanity. Both humane and wise, you, master, are indeed a sage. Confucius was unwilling to accept the title of sage. What sort of thing is that to say of me? Gong Sun Chu said, I have heard it said of Confucius's disciples Zizia, Ziyu, and Zizhang that each was like the master in one respect, while Ran Nu, Minzi, and Yan Yuan each resembled the master in full, but at a lesser level. May I ask which of these fits you? Let us put that aside for now. What would you say if the ancient men Bo Yi and Yi Yin? Mencius said, they followed different Tao's. For Bo Yi, one should serve no man other than one's ruler and rule over no people but those one has a right to rule. When order prevails in the world, one should come forward. When chaos prevails, withdraw. For Yi Yin, one may serve any ruler or rule any people. When order prevails in the world, one should come forward. When chaos prevails, come forward as well. For Confucius, though, one should serve when one should serve and stop when one should stop. Dally in a state when one should dally and depart quickly when one should depart quickly, all as circumstances require. These were all sages of old, and I have not yet been able to practice any of their Tao's. My wish, however, would be to emulate Confucius. Were Bo Yi and Yi Yin in this way the equals of Confucius? No. Since the birth of humankind, there has never been another like Confucius. But did they share aspects in common with him?
Sorry, just quick, could we maybe just read the one little side note on that briefly goes over who they were, Bo Yi and Yi Yin?
Yeah, sure. Bo Yi and Yi Yin are frequently cited as examples of sages by Mencius. In 5b1, he indicates the limits of his praise of them in more detail. And 2a9, he is actively critical of them. Yi Yin was a chief minister to Tang, the Chang founder, and Bo Yin was a worthy hermit who withdrew from society rather than serve imperfect rulers at the time of the Shang-Su transition.
Okay.
When capitalized Tao signifies a teaching about ethics or the cosmos that is considered the highest truth. When the term appears in lowercase case italics, Tao, it signifies a teaching or formula that the Mencius refers to without necessarily endorsing as the ultimate path to wisdom.
Thank you, Ryan.
No worries. We'll continue or?
Eureka can, I think, get back on board.
But did they share aspects in common with him? Mencius said, yes. Had any of them ruled over a territory 100 leagues square, the lords of the states would have served him at his court, and he would have possessed all the world. Had any one of them been offered the chance to gain the world merely by doing one unrighteous deed or killing one innocent person, he would not have done so. In this, they are alike. May I ask in what respect they were different? Confucius's disciples Zai Wu, Zigong, and Yu Ru all had intelligence enough to recognize a sage, and none would have been so base as to show a bias towards a man they loved. Zai Wu said, in my view, the master far surpasses Yao and Shen. Zigong said, the master sees the rituals of a state and from them knows the nature of its governance. He hears its music and from it knows its virtue. He looks back on 100 generations of kings and appraises all of them such that no one can contradict him. Since the birth of humankind, there has never been another like the master. Yu Ru said, it is not thus only with the people. The unicorn is a beast like other beasts, the phoenix a bird like other birds, Mount Tai a hill like any mound, the yellow river and the sea are bodies of water like the stream in a ditch, but all these stand out from their kind, far above the crowd. Since the birth of humankind, there has been no one as outstanding as Confucius.
Really great. The parallels to Plato's Republic, I'm just catching. There's so many things that have struck me, but that's just one thing. I don't know if you guys feel the same thing about what Plato does in the Republic and what Mencius is doing here, or is it just me? It might just be me.
No, the rapprochement is obvious. But I will let the others to give opinions before I begin my speech.
Okay.
No, for me, definitely. You could definitely see the resonance between Platonic thought and Mencius, and seeing that this piece of writing is very much inclined towards the structure of a state. The Republic is resonates with it. So. Am I cutting or?
No, you were heard very well. The paragraph where he's describing how you could infer what is in the heart of somebody by how they comport, how they express themselves. If they're evasive, if they're an evasive speaker, there's something about the disharmony or that underlies that is within their internal constitution, or if they speak too much. And there's a whole variety of things that he's saying you could infer is a disharmony within the soul. And then he gets later on at the paragraph that we just read at the end, he sort of applies that now to the state as a whole, that you could sort of judge the qualitative soul of the state if you could look at its rituals, how it's abusive of them or not, or other things of its outward practices. And that's sort of what Plato does in the Republic. Is, we're trying to look for the question of justice and the harmony of the soul, but you have to go where you don't find an immediate answer within an individual. It helps to sort of take a step back and look at the society as a whole, and then go back down to the individual and look for parallels.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also, as you said exactly, Matt, like, and because, for example, when Plato describes the structure of a state, he describes it through his lens of understanding the constitution of the individual. It always, I mean, everything, the state itself is but an expression of the individual condition. So it always starts from the individual, then it goes out. At least that's how I understood it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anything else we should have in mind, Quan? Obviously, there's a lot in there.
Yes, but I think that that you both have extracted the major rapprochement, okay? Because in chapter 3 of the Republics, Socrates was describing the creation of a good state, and in chapter 4, he would make the rapprochement between, precisely as Ryan said, the structure of a man's soul and the structure of the state. And here, rather than to speak of a chariot with a charioteer and the black horse and the white horse, which is the image that Plato is using, Mencius will talk about the chi, which is the quality of the energy animating the person. And since a virtuous society is composed by virtuous man, obviously, the presence or the absence of virtuous man in a given society will be expressed in the behavior obvious in that society. And that is absolutely the central rapprochement. And let's not forget my catchphrase about the axio epistemo-political science, or triangle rather, because the outside of the triangle is precisely the behavior that can be seen in a person or in a state, or the organization of the state. And precisely that chapter 2 is important, because in chapter 1, he gave some general principles of the organization of the universe and the organization within a human society, and some historical boundaries, if you want. And in chapter 2, we will go to the other important topic, which is the structure of the soul, or if you want, the axiological dimension and the educational or epistemological dimension, how to have access to that axiological dimension.
Hmm.
But when he mentions speech, you mean how the way someone speaks and expresses themselves? For me, it's the way he represented it was like, as though he was talking about the physiognomy of a person. We don't really see that in Plato. For me, when I hear speech and I hear Plato, I always hear, you mean the for me, there's the resonance of rhetorics, and rhetorics as being something bad and contrary to truth. And Plato doesn't really speak very much about the physiognomy, right? Or maybe I'm wrong.
Not in the well, you're right, because he did not tackle that topics in detail in the Republic,
Yeah.
but in another dialogue called the Gorgias, Gorgias, which precisely is about rhetorics, and he will deal with it in detail. But I would say that in the Republic, it's also tackled to a certain extent,
Mhm.
especially when he's making fun of the sophists.
Yeah. He also, in the apology as well, when he has Socrates deliver his defense, Socrates is also making the point that I'm not as capable as all of you, rhetoricians and lawyers. I just speak as a humble man from the heart, and so you might think I'm foolish, but I'm gonna do it. And then he goes and he does like a great job, as he always does, because he's speaking, not from any formulaic or manipulative way. But it's very humble, and that's one of his virtues and sins of the society, is his humility, where he's able to admit that he doesn't know anything, but he knows that he doesn't know, whereas other people who think they know are not aware. And it just reminded me of what Confucius, the character that we just had painted of Confucius, who is embarrassed and doesn't like the idea of his followers calling him wise or a sage. He's like, no, I'm not, it was a very Socratic sentiment that I found expressed in Confucius. It was like, I don't want to be called a sage. I just love, teaching and learning, and that's all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, but yeah, both of them, they just go away from the idea of the self, the ego, towards the universal. So it's just, it goes in one direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I would maybe one last comment is that here we have truly the opposition, the radical opposition between a true education, which is once again educare, to bring forth what is within, and the sophistic fantasy that we might find one day a kind of supreme formula that will solve everything. And it reminds a little bit of the cybernetic fantasies present nowadays.
Right. Looking for a formula. Yeah.
But sorry to go back, like the topic of physiognomy, for some reason, like I find it super interesting. I don't know if someone knows something about it, but I'll probably dig into it someday.
The topic of what?
Physiognomy. So how the body, the allure, the aesthetics of the body kind of combines with the substance of a soul.
But was that even really developed in what we just read?
Not really. The only part that
yeah, go on.
Not really. Yeah, the only part that kind of resonated with that was the idea of speech. But other than that, it wasn't really.
Yeah. But rather than physiognomy, I would say that the presence of the soul will have an effect in the behavior. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
No, but
Yes.
the idea of the material world being subject to an invisible force.
Well, I'm surprised you use the word physiognomy, because that's the famous body-mind problem. No.
Yeah.
I'm right to say that you are speaking of the body-mind problem, or even the body-mind-soul structure?
It's a bit because body mind, it's more, it doesn't take into consideration aesthetics. Physiognomy is more aesthetics based. You see sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because in the own religions there is a kind, what we would consider nowadays as superstition, but I don't know if it's one of the answers to your question. But in the own religions, people believe that how a man looks is a reflection of his soul. And we are not speaking of the behavior. We are speaking of how he looks, his face, his body.
That's sort of like the school of phrenology as well, too, right? That the shape of the skull, the shape of the face determines whether that person will be inclined to be a criminal or somebody of virtue, which became mired in eugenics.
That would be another level. Of course, certain persons are more good looking than others. That's a reality of life. But I would say that in the own religion, they would say that if you're handsome, it's because it's a reflection of your soul. But we all know handsome people who have very bad behavior, and ugly people who are sage. For example, I cannot testify for myself, but apparently Socrates was rather ugly, okay, according to tradition. So we have here a deep problem that we would need to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Socrates might be, I think, traditionally, and You mean ugly as in his writings? Yeah, he wasn't the typical type of, he wasn't Alcibiades, for example, but I
And you give an excellent example because Alcibiades was extraordinarily handsome,
Yeah.
but his behavior was extraordinarily bad.
yeah, yeah, but at the same time, even sages, even though they might traditionally not be handsome, but there is something within their physiognomy that that gives out this I mean,
Do you mean like
the
their
look of
grace? Do you mean like a certain characteristic of grace in their gait?
yeah,
Is that what you?
yeah,
You don't mean the physiological expression of their bodies so much as how they comport themselves gracefully is how you're thinking.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
grace once again bring us back to behavior.
yeah. Because the thing is that the whole thing, like whether it's the physical look or whether it's the way someone speaks or the mannerisms, just the whole physical aspect, everything together, speech, look, it gives a certain intuition into a certain person. That's why, for example, sometimes you have the notion of someone who can would you not a sage, but someone who can look into your life and forecast certain events just by looking at you, or just by looking at the aesthetics. You mean at your physical aspect?
I have a
Yeah,
problem with that, but
well, I might orient Ryan to a ancient Chinese art of physiognomy precisely because in Chinese Taoism there's an art called physiognomy, and it's exactly what you just said, Ryan. That looking by the physical features of your face and your body, that the kind of people would predict your future or your capabilities that you're not even aware of.
Yeah. There's the thing is that there's a certain intuition that is very deeply founded that unites the body and the soul, and sometimes this intuition is very hard to grasp, but and it's a matter of spontaneous intuition where you see the physical aspect, the physical shape, and you can see something within this eternal realm of the soul, which is super interesting, I think.
I would say that here there is the fine distinction between physical as behavior, because the behavior is physical, okay? How I raise my voice, or how I speak with a moderate volume, or how I speak softly is physical, because it's how I project the energy, okay? But the fine distinction is that the physical can be also the face feature, for example, or the size of the person, and that physical dimension is not directly controlled by your mind soul, unless you accept certain religious beliefs that your physical body is the external reality of your internal soul, because the old religions have that kind of hypothesis.
Yeah, because at the same time, your physical body it's not ad hoc. The way you look, right? It's not ad hoc. Like there,
You can make some modification, but I would say that 80% is given to you, no?
sorry, 80% is?
80% of the physical body is given to you. You can have a certain hairstyle, you can dress in a certain manner, but it doesn't change the features of your face or of your bodily constitution.
Yeah, it doesn't. Like, and at the same time, for example, you are like the individual is born, the, and also the individual, we have certain freedoms, but our freedom is each individual has a certain nature that he is born with, and that you cannot uh, mutate completely. You see, you can try to improve on certain aspects of your nature or your character, but you are what you are, right? I don't know, like, and the same thing goes for
yes. Here we are in big debate of nature and nurture. Okay, and yes, there is a part that is given to you. I agree on that, and you can improve a little bit on that, or if you make a truly big effort, you can transform yourself completely. But there is a given element that you cannot do much. For example, if you are 6 feet high, you are 6 feet high. Okay, you're not 5 feet, you're not 7 feet. That's something given, unless you accept to undergo a big surgical operation. I know that in Korea, for example, many people are willing to undergo a very painful surgical operation to gain a little bit in height, for example. But it's not something easy to go through.
Yeah. But yeah.
But anyway, if you're interested by that, in the branch of Taoism, there is that discipline called physiognomy, and it's exactly what you said 10 minutes ago.
Okay. Oh, sorry. What's it called again?
Physiognomy, exactly the word that you use, but in Chinese Taoism, there's a tradition that would judge a man according to his face feature.
Yeah. And is there like a certain book or something that you could refer me to?
I'm not a specialist in that branch. I suggest you to go on the internet, write Chinese Taoism and physiognomy. I'm sure you will find plenty of things. But I would like to advise you to be cautious in this.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, there. Yeah.
I would just maybe vote that perhaps we
Continue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead.
Yeah. Who would like? Do you want to? Eureka, do you want to keep reading, or do we switch readers?
What's up, Eureka? She's around.
I've got the air conditioning on here, so I don't know whether you can hear that.
Do you want me to continue or?
You're doing a great job. Yeah, it was nice.
Okay. Where are we? 22A3?
Exactly.
Mencius said, one who relies on force but borrows humanity as a means will rule as a hegemon. A hegemon must possess a large state, but he who relies on virtue to put humanity into practice will rule as a true king, and a true king is not reliant upon his state being large. Tang's state was a mere 70 li square, and King Wen's but 100.
That's a great quote worth saving. Sorry.
When one relies on force to make others submit, submission does not come from their hearts. It is merely that their strength was not sufficient. When one relies on virtue to make others submit, they feel pleased in their heart's core to do so, and their submission is sincere, as the 70 disciples submitted to Confucius. It is the poetry means when it says, from the west, from the east, from the south, from the north, none thought not to submit.
Which poetry is he referring to?
That's the Shu Jing. Okay, in the it's about 300 poetry poems, dating most of them between 1046 and 7070 BCE. 770 BCE, meaning the period when the Chow Dynasty kings truly ruled. Okay, and there are 5 classics in the Chinese civilization. You have the Shu Qing, which is the classics of poetry, which is what they mean by poetry. You have the classic of documents. You have the Chun Chu, which has been written by Confucius, and you have the Yi Qing, of course, and you have the Yue Qing, which is a classics on music, which is lost now. And when we are talking about the Analects of Confucius, the Mencius, the Chongyong, the doctrine of the mean, and Ta Sui, the great study or the one study, those 4 together are called the 4 books. Okay, so you have the 5 classics and the 4 books. And I forgot one classic, the Li Yi, which is the classics on the rituals, or at the deeper level, the metaphysical principles. So we talk a little bit of the Analects before, and now we are reading the Mencius. So we are reading 2 of the 4 books in Chinese, Sushu.
Okay.
Mencius said, "Those who are humane achieve glory. Those who are inhumane suffer disgrace. To detest disgrace but to dwell in inhumanity is like hating the damp and dwelling in bottomland. If you detest disgrace, it is best to exalt virtue and honor gentlemen. When worthy men have high position and able men are in office, and the ruler seizes time of peace to make clear his policies of state and the penalties of his laws, even great states will certainly be in awe." This is what the poetry means when it says, "Before the heavens were darkened with rain, I peeled strips of bark from the mulberry tree and bound up the window and bound up the door. And now among the people below, who dares to treat me with scorn?" Confucius said, "Did not the man who composed this poem understand the Tao? A ruler able to order his state, who dares to treat him with scorn? But now, if a ruler seizes times of peace as occasions for indulgent pleasures and lazy arrogance, then he is simply seeking misfortune. It is always the case that fortune and misfortune are the products of our own actions."
I'm sorry, before you continue on, Eureka, I have a quick question. I just rereading that poem that he just cited. Confucius really likes that poem, and he says, "Did not the man who composed this understand the Tao?" I'm not able to understand the poem. I don't understand the Tao. Could somebody please just elucidate what is the virtue in that poem that is being expressed about the ruler's wisdom? Is it that he had foresight before the storm had hit with rain? That he acted, he acted with foresight, right, to protect the house, to bound the door, to peel the strips of bark from the mulberry tree, which I guess would have been destroyed if it had gotten caught in the rain. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, just thank you.
It's a metaphor for good governance. And you know that I like to speak French, so good governance, gouverner, c'est prévoir.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's a useful idea.
Yes.
Huh.
And for once, the French is shorter than the Chinese version. Gouverner, c'est prévoir.
Okay.
And I'm not gonna take up too much time, but I'd like, maybe after we finish reading, I'd like to Quan or Matthew or anyone, if we can discuss, because I find not intuition, but foresight. What is the nature of foresight? Uh, when you predict something in the future, what does that even mean? Is that intuition? Is that a combination of logic and something else? What's the nature of it?
I'm not being very modest here, Ryan, but I would suggest you to look at my presentation on the I Ching on Rising Tide Foundation.
Right.
Sure.
I'll email that to you. It's a really nice presentation.
Yeah, please.
And of course, I would be delighted to discuss it with you if you wish after.
First. But if Matt, if you could send it over, that would be great.
I certainly, I'm going to make a note of it right now. I Ching. Okay, it will be yours. Okay.
It is always the case that fortune and misfortune are the products of our own actions. This is what the poetry means when it says, "Ever be worthy of Tian's mandate and seek out your own many blessings." And it is what the Tai Jia means when it says, "Heaven sent disaster one may hope to evade. When one brings disaster upon oneself will surely die."
It says there, the Tiajia was a chapter in the book of documents. The original text is now, lost. Okay.
Mencius said, "If a ruler honors the worthy and employs the able, placing outstanding men in office, then the gentlemen of the world will all appreciate him and wish to find a place at his court. If in his markets, where there are taxes on stall inventories, there is no tax on goods sold, and where there is a tax upon the land that stalls occupy, stall inventory is not taxed, then the merchants of the world will appreciate him and wish to store their goods at his markets. If his border customs officers examine travelers but do not tax them, then the wayfarers of the world will appreciate him and wish to journey on his roads. If he taxes plowmen with corvée work on his lands and does not tax their crops, then the farmers of the world will appreciate him and seek to plow the untilled lands in his realm. If he eliminates the corvée levy on those who do not work and the tax on cultivated mulberry trees, then the people of the world will appreciate him and wish to become his subjects. If a ruler were indeed able to put these 5 measures into practice, then the people in neighboring states would look up to him as their father and mother. And since the birth of humankind, none has ever been able to induce children to attack their fathers and mothers. In this way, such a ruler will be without any enemy in the world. Such a man is the agent of Tian, and never has there been such a one who did not rule as a true king.
The term corvée is a tax exacted in the form of compulsory labor.
Mencius said, "All people possesses within them a moral sense that cannot bear the suffering of others. The former kings had such a moral sense, and thus they devised means of government that would not allow people to suffer. If a ruler were to employ the moral sense that makes human suffering unendurable in order to implement such humane government, he would find bringing the entire world into order to be simple, as though he were turning the world in his hand. Why do I say that all people possess within them a moral sense that cannot bear the suffering of others? Well, imagine now a person who, all of a sudden, sees a small child on the verge of falling down into a well. Any such person would experience a sudden sense of fright and dismay. This feeling would not be something he summoned up in order to establish good relations with the child's parents. He would not purposefully feel this way in order to win the praise of their friends and neighbors. Nor would he feel this way because the screams of the child would be unpleasant. By imagining the situation, we can see that one who lacked a sense of dismayed commiseration in such a case simply could not be a person. Moreover, anyone who lacks the sense of shame cannot be a person. Anyone who lacks a sense of difference cannot be a person. Anyone who lacks a sense of right and wrong cannot be a person. The sense of commiseration is the seed of humanity. The sense of shame is the seed of righteousness. The sense of deference is the seed of ritual, and the sense of right and wrong is the seed of wisdom.
Is commiseration the same as empathy or sympathy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe the most obvious equivalent is pity. Okay, to have pity on someone.
Okay.
Like compassion?
Compassion would be a higher form of pity, because in pity there is an unconscious or subconscious feeling of superiority, and in compassion it's the noblest form of pity because there is no unconscious feeling of superiority.
That's a great definition. I never thought of it that way, but that's great.
Yeah, very well said.
That needs to be saved and posted in the groups, Dr. Kwan.
Yeah.
And then we can copy it and use it.
Wow. Yorika, I know that you have enough sense of nobility that you don't have to copy it.
No, we're gonna have a section on our website of Kwan's words of wisdom. We're just gonna accumulate them.
No, it's not me. It's Confucius and Mencius. I prefer that.
By the way, Kwan, I have a question. Like, why in the Chinese text we find a lot of proverbs that are used within Western tradition? You don't have this, this tendency towards proverbs.
Yes, because those proverbs, okay, in Chinese it's called Cheng Yu, okay, and maybe Yong Hong is better than me for that. Cheng Yu are the proverbs or parts of ancient poetry that are the nutshells of the wisdoms of the ancients. So in Chinese culture, there are plenty of them. For example, I don't know, you see my small red book over there. It's a collection of it's a collection of Cheng Yu, or words of wisdom from the ancient times.
Okay.
And it's part of ordinary Chinese culture. Well, in the West too, because sometimes you wouldn't cite Shakespeare, for example, or you wouldn't quote Plato, or you wouldn't quote Cicero. It's a kind of Western equivalent of the Chinese Chengyu.
In better times, we did. In better times,
Maybe.
But it's true. Yeah, if you read Plato, there's a lot of points when Plato cites Homer, little snippets from Homer or the poet to make a point. As a nugget of wisdom, or even Kennedy, like Robert F. Kennedy or John F. Kennedy's speeches, they do that a lot, where they'll cite an ancient Greek text or some other thing to
Yeah.
punctuate their idea.
Yeah, you're right. But just generally speaking, I find just Proverbs to be much more a Chinese characteristic than the West. Even in Platonic dialogues, there are more dialogues more than you mean?
Yes, I agree with you. If you're speaking of your generation, or maybe my generation too, but I kept many of my own teachers as personal friends, and when they talk, they have a tendency to quote Homer, Plato, Cicero, Schiller, Shakespeare. So for the older generation, I think there is not much difference between the West and the East, in my opinion and personal experience.
You want to, Eureka? You're allowed.
Okay. Everyone possesses these four moral senses just as they possess their four limbs. To possess such seeds and yet claim to be unable to call them forth is to rob oneself. And for a person to claim that his ruler is incapable of such moral feelings is to rob his ruler. As we possess these four senses with us, if only we realize that we need to extend and fulfill them, then the force of these senses will burst through us like a wildfire first catching or a spring first bursting forth through the ground. If a person can bring these impulses to fulfillment, they will be adequate to bring all the four quarters under his protection. But if a person fails to develop these senses, he will fail even to serve his own parents. Mencius said, "How could it be that arrow makers are less humane than men who make shields? It is merely that those who make arrows are concerned that their arrows will not wound men, while shield makers are concerned that their shields will not protect men from wounds. It is the same comparing shaman healers and coffin makers. So one must take care in choosing an art." Confucius said, "To settle in humanity is the fairest course. If one chooses not to dwell amidst humanity, whence will come knowledge? Humanity is the exalted office of Tian and the safe haven of humankind. When nothing stands in the way, to fail to be humane is to lack wisdom. To be without humanity, without wisdom, without ritual, and without right is to be a slave. To be a slave and feel shame at being a slave is to be like the bow or arrow maker ashamed of his art. If you feel ashamed, simply act with humanity. To act with humanity is like archery. The archer only shoots his arrow after setting himself aright. It is, if his shot misses the mark, he doesn't blame the man who prevailed. He simply turns to seek the cause within himself. Mencius said, when anyone pointed out to Zilu an error that he had made, he was pleased. When Yu heard good speech, he bowed. The great Shun surpassed even this. He prized the goodness of others as he prized his own, and would cast off all self-regard to follow others, delighting to emulate them in doing good. In rising from being a farmer, making pots and fishing, to becoming emperor, he drew everything from others. One who draws from others in this way joins people together in doing good, and there is nothing the Yunzi prizes more than joining with people to do good together. Are there some notes there?
No.
Okay. Mencius said, for Boyi, if a ruler were not fit to rule in his eyes, he would not serve him. And if a person were not fit to be his friend, he would not befriend him. He would not consent to stand in the court of a bad ruler, and he would not speak with a bad man. He regarded such actions as equivalent to wearing a court robe, and that while sitting in mud or ashes. He extended the sense of hating the bad so far that were he standing by a fellow villager whose hat he judged awry, he would move far away as if fearing defilement. Consequently, though Lord sent him invitations in honeyed words, he would not receive them and refused to go serve them.
Why would lords want this guy? He sounds like a bit of a dick. Like, why would people want his service?
Yeah.
All right, I guess that's a rhetorical question. Yeah, I see. It serves the lesson. I'm undermining the lesson being developed here.
Lucia Hu considered it no shame to serve a corrupt ruler, no debasement to accept a lowly office. He never hid his abilities when in service, but always accorded with the Tao. When passed over, he felt no resentment, nor did he feel distress when in straitened circumstances. He said, "You are you and I am I. Though you stripped and stood naked by my side, how could you defile me?" In this way, with carefree heart, he kept company with other men and never damaged his integrity. When pressed to remain in a post, he would do simply because he felt no pressing need to go. Mencius said, Bo Yi was narrow-minded. Lu Hu was indecorous. Indecorous?
Yes, exact.
Yun Zi will not emulate them.
Yeah, a junzi, meaning a gentleman, will not emulate that.
Junzi.
Christine, you want to read the note?
Oh, I don't. Are we finished the section?
Oh,
Oh, it is finished.
Yes.
Okay. Liu Xiahui is a semi-legendary figure, originally a native grandee of Lu in the 7th century. Rich legends of his worthiness and selflessness were elaborated by early Confucians. So we're finished
Continue.
the book? Oh.
So that's the end of section 2. What do we want to do now? Should we discuss anything that we've read, or should we press on to the next section 2b?
I would suggest to discuss it because we still have about 20 minutes. And this section is very important because it's at the heart of the axio-epistemal political triangle, especially the educational and epistemological dimensions.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I don't know.
Sorry.
Okay, please.
The question is very relevant for our current corrupt, confused day. I mean, all of the points that were raised regarding whether you try to organize a society like a hegemon, or whether you wish to organize society with virtue and the mandate of heaven. That's something which people in the West don't have much of a conception of whatsoever. And I think they have less of a conception if they spent years going through political science in university. They probably are more intellectually destroyed from their ability to understand this idea of natural law, which is just very, very elegantly developed in the course of some of these last few sections.
Exactly. And I would say that in the classes of political sciences nowadays, they are learning the technocratic skills to assist a hegemon and not learning precisely the roots of the natural order.
Yeah. Yeah, well said.
And I would say what is a tragedy is that, as you said in the beginning, Matt, of your comment, is that the fundamental distinction between the government of a true king, to use Mencius' vocabulary, and the government of hegemon, even that fundamental distinction in Chinese, Wang Tao or Pa Tao, even that fundamental distinction is not even recognized.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing.
The thing that I would like to make some speech on is if you can find the section where Eureka, since you were reading, do you remember what section they were talking of? It's by deference that you will learn the rites or the rituals. And by, okay, I have it. Okay. The senses, I'm sorry. Okay, it's moving. Okay, let's try to find the passage where they talk of the sense of shame and so on.
Oh, I could do a Control F.
I imagine. So that's where it starts.
Give me the numbers, please.
Page 44, right on top there.
Okay.
44.
Oh, Matt, we were right
44.
beside it. You're going the wrong way.
44. There's 44.
Oh, of the PDF thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's
okay.
where it's talking about the inner the four inner virtues, right? That qualify somebody to be a man, to be human.
Exactly, because that's the core, okay? Because contrary to chapter 1, A and B, when he spoke more of general principles of metaphysics concerning the universe and the human organization and historical context, this chapter 2, A and B, is much more about the educational aspect, okay? How to reach to the axiological dimension of truth, goodness, and beauty. And as we read during the last hour, there are many possibilities to translate truth, okay? But Tao is probably the best equivalent of truth. Ran is the best equivalent for goodness. And beauty is a yi in Chinese, but yi doesn't mean beauty. Yi means justice, okay? Because let's not forget that the supreme metaphysical principle of beauty is also understood, and I'm speaking of the Western tradition, as harmony, cosmos, which is the Greek word for harmony, or beauty. Okay, so truth, goodness, beauty, aletheia, kagatos, and kalos in Greek. In Chinese is Tao, Ran, and Yi. Okay, and in this and Tao, Ran, and Yi are three words that will be repeated constantly through the Mencius, but we met them in chapter A, B, and we still met them in chapter 2, A and B. And that chapter at page 44, second paragraph, is truly central in when we speak on the educational dimension. Okay, so the sense of commiseration is the seat of humanity. The sense of shame is the seat of righteousness. The sense of deference is the seat of ritual, and the sense of right and wrong is the seat of wisdom. Okay, so everyone possesses these four moral senses, just as they possess their four limbs. To possess such seeds and yet claim to be unable to call them forth is to rob oneself. And for a person to claim that his ruler is incapable of such moral feeling is to rob his ruler. Okay, so that's truly the centrality of the education. And when I was speaking of the axio-epistemo-political triangle, there's no and I was speaking of the fact that the Mohists were naive because they were trying to solve the social problems by acting only on the external organization and not focusing on the educational dimensions like the school of the scholars focus open. And when they were speaking of the quality of deference that will bring to ritual, okay, let's not forget that ritual is not only the act, the ceremonial act, but also the adventure to understand the deep metaphysical principles. Okay, so deference is maybe not the best word in my understanding. Maybe it's better to say awe. Okay, because we all know that the feeling of awe when observing the universe or nature will bring precisely to the advance of science, of inventivity, and of discovery. Okay, so I take some time to talk about that because deference bringing to ritual is not obvious at first that it means awe that will bring to the adventure of investigation into reality, either universal physical reality or reality of human organization.
Yeah, that's an important distinction or concept that you elaborated on. I appreciate that a lot. These core virtues, I really love the sense because there's twice in this text where he had made the point of how quickly a society can be transformed from a state of unnatural ugliness to a state of being itself and beautiful and good. And he did it here, where in that last paragraph to this section where he says, as we possess these four senses within us, if only we realize that we need to extend and fulfill them, then the force of these senses will burst through us like a wildfire, first catching or a spring first bursting forth through the ground. If a person can bring these impulses to fulfillment, they will be adequate to bring all of the four quarters under his protection. But if a person fails to develop that, he couldn't even serve his own parents. But I mean, the quickness and naturalness upon which these things occur creates a transformation. And earlier on, I think a few pages earlier, he had said how quickly a people, if you just give them the opportunity to express their inner potential, they will transform, right? So as if you would stop torturing them or something like that, you know, like people who could. And we get demoralized, I think, today. You know, you just walk around the society we live in and we just see people being their worst selves and doing it day in, day out, adapting to fascism and immorality. And it's easy to get pessimistic about how bad human nature is, but it's important to keep this deeper character in mind, that this is not the natural state of humanity that we see around us, and how quickly it would be possible for people to access happily their virtues if they were given the opportunity. Or similarly, rulers as well, we should hold them accountable. A lot of people just say, oh, they're politicians, so they have to be corrupt. Of course. So they, you know, we don't hold our elected officials accountable for their misdeeds because we just have been brainwashed to think that that's their nature. And then he's just saying here, like Mencius is saying, no, you're actually robbing your ruler. You're robbing the leaders if you take on that attitude to think that they're incapable of such moral feelings. So it's like both.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, just so it's both the corruption and possibility of transforming the leaders as well as the masses. That I like that he's navigating through both of those problems.
Yes, exactly. Um, and going back to, and that's another way that you express the same thing that you expressed 10 minutes ago, meaning that they suppose that the ruler are like that because they accept the brainwash idea that there is no opposition between the government of a true king and the government of a hegemon, because they suppose that they are necessarily all hegemons,
Mm,
successful hegemons or unsuccessful hegemons.
mhm.
Okay, the last thing that I would like to make as a rapprochement, okay, here we have wisdom, righteousness, ritual, and humanity. I would like to remind that in the West, in the classical West, in Greece and Rome, the four cardinal virtues are wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation. Okay, if you read the Marcus Aurelius or you read the Cicero, you have those four major or cardinal virtues listed. And here we have the same, but with other names. Okay, wisdom is also called wisdom with Mencius. Justice is called righteousness with Mencius. Courage is called ritual. I will go back to why I say that courage is called ritual, and moderation is called humanity. And courage is called ritual because, once again, ritual is not the ceremonial action, but rather to embark on the journey of discovery, inventivity, and creativity. And it takes a certain courage to uh, to live ourselves out of our ordinary lifestyle and to go on that adventure of creativity and of discovery precisely. So once again, there are many things who are exactly the same in the East or in the West when we speak of classical cultures.
Mhm.
Can I ask one question, Quan?
Yes, please, of course.
Um, I was I wanted to ask about chi, the word QI, because that's new to me. I'm trying to figure it out. But the part that Matt was just reading about the four moral senses, there was that one line, the force of these senses will burst through us like a wildfire. The force of these senses, is that comparable to chi? Is there a relationship between those two?
Yes, because you have Li and you have Qi. Okay, Li can be translated as principles or foundation. Okay, and
Mhm.
Qi, if I have to choose just one word for Qi, is energy or force. So uh, either Alcibiades or Socrates have the same Li because they are under the same universal principles. But Socrates worked on his mind, so he has a more refined chi. And because of this more refined chi, he's more capable to express it in a healthier way than Alcibiades, because Alcibiades did not work on his soul and his mind. So his chi is not as refined, and his chi, being as not refined, is not capable to be in intimate contact with the foundations of reality, which is the source of all wisdom, courage, justice, or moderation, or humanity. Truth, goodness, and beauty, if you want, okay? Because truth, goodness, and beauty are not human creations, it's the fabric of the universe. But if you don't have a refined enough chi, you will not be capable to be in contact with the fountainhead where comes truth, goodness, and beauty.
And this is like the capital D Tao, right?
Yes, that's the capital D Tao, exactly. The D, capital D Tao is truth, okay? goodness is Ran, agape by Mac Billington, and beauty is Yi. But Yi is not exactly beauty. Yi means cosmos or justice, okay? Which the word that the Chinese prefer to beauty, but is exactly the same level of universal principle than beauty.
Gorgeous.
Okay.
Okay, sorry to insist on that because I wanted to stress that that paragraph is very important for chapter 2.
Understood. Is there I know we're going to shift gears and read some Indian philosophy in a few weeks, but is there anything comparable in the let's say Vedic or world system to Qi and Tao the way you described it that's connected to the truth, goodness, beauty?
Absolutely, Matt, because Chi in Sanskrit is prana, Prana, and Li is Rita, Rita. But Rita is also a first a given name in the West. But Rita is a Sanskrit word meaning truth.
Excellent. I look forward to our next reading of Vedic works. Cool.
The Indian civilization, the Chinese civilization, and the classical Western civilization, at the most foundational principles, they are all the same. Believe me or not.
By the way, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Vedic texts haven't been, they're quite recent, right? They're like after AD. They're not.
No. The oldest Vedic text is about 1500 BCE. So they are about at the same time than the Shang Dynasty and the Yi Ching and those kind of things. And the deeper philosophical development of the first Vedic texts are the Upanishad, and the Upanishad were before the Buddha. So it's around, it's a period of time. Okay, so we can say that Upanishad were around 800 BCE to the time of the Buddha around 500 BCE.
It's weird
So
because I was reading the a book. It's called L'histoire de l'architecture by one of a very central architecture theorist, because I was writing like my text on architecture. So when he starts to discusses Indian architecture, he brings into play the Vedic texts and tries to talk about them, and says that the Vedic texts are not as old as they seem, and they're actually written after Jesus Christ, so in the 1st century AD or something of that sort.
it is possible that the written traces of some of those Vedic texts has been put into written form in AD. That I would agree with you. But the tradition, the oral tradition, because in India, the oral tradition is stronger than in China. And in China, the written tradition is stronger than in India. But the oral tradition of the Vedas are truly from 1500 BCE, and the oral tradition for the Upanishad were before the Buddha Siddhartha Gautama. That's for sure.
Okay.
And I would be a little bit polemical here. I understand the how can I say that, the need for written proof. That's for sure. Okay, we cannot claim anything without written proof. But at the same time, there's a tendency to reject oral tradition that is quite unfortunate, according to me.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts before we wrap up today's session?
I just want to mention one other thing because it relates to what I did on Sunday. On I wrote it down 2A.8. There's just a fascinating quote. Can you scroll down to that, Matt?
Which one? 2A.
Point 8. Up a bit. Right. Okay, right there. The last line in that section. One who draws from others in this way joins people together in doing good. For there is nothing the Junsi prizes more than joining people to do good. It just so reminded me. I used that quote from Cotton Mather about how does it go? And it's an invaluable honor to do good. It's an indescribable pleasure. It's just the exact same idea there. It really struck me. If we had done this last week, I could have used that quote in my class. I'm a week behind. I could have rewritten it. Yeah. But it's right there.
But yeah,
Join people
that's
to do good.
that's the solution. Eh? Like, when do you go and intervene in the world outside yourself? Some formulas would say, if the world is corrupt, then just stay away from it. Either go into become a recluse or just like act like that uppity snob who didn't want to talk to anybody with a bad hat, or you could like just try to be pragmatic and adapt to it and try to like, you know, adapt to the evil of the world, or you could just follow your conscience and your chi and do good and just love doing good no matter what, and make your judgments accordingly. Like, if you're going to compromise in something, at least it'll be organized around your love of the good and not something lower. You're going to be able to make judgments in navigating all sorts of experiences you never could have imagined would have befallen you.
Mhm.
There's no
Yes.
formula. There's no technocratic cybernetic formula for success.
What is the Junsi or the Yunsi? The Junsi prizes.
Do you ask
Yeah.
what was the
what is it, Juan? I don't know what that word means.
Okay.
Junsi prizes.
Okay, Junzi means the gentleman.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Jun means a lord and Zi means son. So Junzi means the son of a lord or a gentleman. Okay, so first it was a title of nobility. Okay, but with time, especially from Confucius, Junzi denotes a moral quality, a person of goodness, rather than being born into the nobility.
So, shall we close it up for tonight?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So next week we have, as you recommended here, we read section 2B, 3A, 3B, 6A, and 7A. So we have a few weeks of working through Mencius's mind and soul, which is very exciting. And then we got some other things online after that.
Yeah, and in chapter 3A and 3B, it will be more political. Okay,
Ooh.
it will speak about yes, and 6A, Ryan. We will talk about what happened in 314 BCE and why he quit politics, and it will be much more geopolitical, if I may say so. But it will be in 2 weeks.
Exciting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.
Good night, everyone.
Okay. Now,
Good night, everyone. Thank you.